Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Commendatore. I'm the Director of Student Orientation, Parent and Family Programs, and it's our pleasure to be able to welcome you to campus this weekend and reconnect with your students, so we hope that you're enjoying your time. I'm especially excited to be standing up here to introduce somebody who I admire. A lifetime of never taking no for an answer took John Quiñones from the migrant farm work and poverty to more than 30 years at ABC News, 7 Emmys, the anchor at 2020, and Primetime Live. Along the way, he broke through barriers, he won the highest of accolades, and became a role model for many. As host and creator of What Would You Do?, the Hidden Camera Ethical Dilemma News magazine, John Quiñones has literally become the face of doing the right thing to millions of fans. So for those of you who have not seen a clip of What Would You Do?, which can't be many of you, I would like to introduce this clip. What would you do?
Okay, ready?
Here we go. After 11 seasons.
Are you serious?
120 amazing shows.
Oh my God.
This is What Would You Do?
Are you serious?
Situations that pushed you to the edge.
That was insane.
And made you stand up.
How many times do I have to explain this to you? You're a foster kid. Now stop it. Take care of him.
Whatever he wants, I'll put it on my bill.
And cheer.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
What our hidden cameras catch.
You with a white girl? Excuse me?
They're ruining the black family.
Poverty's ruined the black family. That white girl's not ruined the black family.
How you doing, sir? She doesn't really work here.
Thank you.
When people don't know they're being watched.
You know, video games are for guys.
Really?
Yeah.
She can play the damn game. Okay? Thank you very much.
You're okay, ma'am.
Oh, hell no.
What
Will just blow you away.
It is John Quiñones.
This is the best show ever.
So, how do you ever top all of that?
Gotta be kidding.
Well, just wait till you catch this new season.
Ashley Graham, welcome to What Would You Do?
Thank you so much.
Why did you want to take part in What Would You Do?
I grew up on the show, so you're like an icon in my house.
And when this supermodel and super role model, who's dealt personally and taken on the body shamers, sees this.
We can't wait to meet your girlfriend.
You guys are gonna love her.
A young man excitedly introducing his new girlfriend
Here she is.
to his parents.
Mom, Dad, this is Bethany.
Hi, it's so nice to finally meet you both.
Only to have his own parents shame her for her weight.
You are a big girl.
Even Ashley's surprised and moved by what people will do.
Can you please stop? How are you going to judge someone by the size of their body? That's horrible.
And what happens next? Hold on
Oh, my God.
for new and amazing episodes of
We do a show called What Would You?
Yeah, I've seen it.
You know the show?
TGIF. It's back.
How are you?
Goodness.
Fridays this summer at 9/8 Central on ABC.
I watch your show all the time.
So the question is, what would you do?
Please join me, Mr. John Quiñones.
Wow, thank you. What would you do? It's great to be here. Thank you, Lisa. Wow, what a crowd. Really nice to be here. Thank you, Lisa. Didn't she pronounce Quiñones very well? It's not the easiest name to pronounce. I've been called everything from Quinones to Quinones. So I appreciate it when they say Quiñones. What a pleasure it is to be with all of you here, students and parents at Northeastern University, my first time here. And I've traveled all the way from New York City, which is not that far, but I came here to thank you, to congratulate each and every one of you. You should all be tremendously proud, all of you, because trust me, I know this is a family affair. I just put 3 kids through college myself, so I know that it can be a struggle and it can be a pain. But trust me, in the end, it's all worth it. Yes, I'm the creator of What Would You Do?, a show that I came up with 10 years ago And who would have thought, man? When I started it, I said, we can do 3 or 4 of these episodes, and then we're going to run out of ideas. And here we are, 500 scenarios later, and 10 years later, still doing the show. Because, it's the show that poses the question, when you see something disturbing, any kind of injustice, and the little voice in the back of your head says, do something, do you step in, or do you step away? It's also the show that's made it impossible for me to go have dinner anywhere without people asking, what's going to happen? I'm going to eat. The other day I was on an airplane, and the flight attendant hadn't seen me, and I was going to the lavatory, and she hadn't seen me before. And when I stepped up, and we were face to face suddenly, and she let out a scream. She's like, "Oh my God, it's John Quiñones. What's going to happen on the airplane now?" The good news is that when I'm around, people are on their best behavior, just in case those hidden cameras are rolling. And we can hide those cameras anywhere. So like here. So if you're sitting there and the person next to you passes out and you step over them to go get another drink, you're going to have me to talk. You've been warned, okay? I'm really proud. I'm proud of What Would You Do, because it shines a light on issues like racism and bullying and discrimination and gay bashing at a time in this country when I think we need it more than ever before. I've never seen this nation as divided as it is today. So much hatred and so much bigotry out there. Just look at all the noise that's being done by white supremacists in this country, the fight over gays and transgenders in the military, and this whole discussion over DACA and the Dreamers, students who could face deportation simply because their parents brought them to this country as babies in search of a better life. There's too much talk in this country right now about creating barriers and building walls when we should be talking about building bridges. I think so. And all of this is further fueled by all the ugly words from politicians, right? From the White House, from pundits on television, and of course, social media, where all the bigots are protected by anonymity. No one knows who they are. You really get the sense right now in this country that respect and common decency are somehow taboo. And that's why I think there's no better time than now for What Would You Do, for a show like this, because after all, the measure of a person's character, right? What is it? It's not what we do when everyone's watching. That's easy. The true measure of a person's character is what we do when we think no one is watching. And with those hidden cameras on the show, we're able to remind Americans and people throughout the world, because folks are now watching it all over YouTube, we remind them that despite all the progress that's been made in this country, and there has been progress when it comes to gay rights and in certain issues, the fact is there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to accepting people who are different from us. Almost 3,000 years ago, the great Greek philosopher and scientist Aristotle wrote something that I think is very appropriate, especially to a college audience. He reminded us that educating the mind without educating the heart is really no education at all. And that's what my show is all about, educating the heart. Because the issues that we tackle on the show, like racism and discrimination and bullying, they really do happen in this country, right? But they happen in the shadows when we think no one is watching. We just bring it out in the open and we put a hidden camera on it. But these things really do happen in life. It happened to me the other day. I mean, here I am. I think I'm a famous TV reporter, right? I got my own TV show. Well, the other day, I was at the airport in Dallas, and I was changing flights, and I got in the wrong line. I was lucky enough to be in first class, and all the first class passengers, I was in the right line, in fact. It said first class, but all the first class passengers had lined up on the economy side, which happens. But when I was there waiting at the front of the first class line, the person in the front on the other line yelled at me, this woman, really cranky. She said, "Sir, we're over here. The first-class passengers are over here." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry." So I went to the back of that line, and I started asking people, "Are you in first?" "Yeah." I didn't care. Christ, I'm still in first class. But on my way back, she yelled at me, "The announcement was made in English. We speak English in this country." And the other folks in line, they had that same reaction. She had never seen me on television. But the other folks who had said, "John, is this a what would you do scenario?" I said, "Unfortunately, no. This is real life." She judged me. She did what people do on the TV show every Friday night. She judged me by the color of my skin and presumed that I didn't speak English. So I'm standing there, and my concern now is whether I should whether I'm going to have to sit next to this woman, right? I didn't want to for the whole 3-hour flight. Fortunately, no. So I get on the plane, and she's over there in the window, in the bulkhead by herself, really grouchy, and I couldn't resist. I leaned over and I said, "Ma'am, I do this TV show called What Would You Do? And you would be perfect for the show, You could play the part of the racist, right?" True story. It really happened. Thank you. I got the greatest compliment the other day on social media. Someone wrote, "The world would be a better place if we all thought John Quiñones was in the next room monitoring our behavior," right? Because we would be on our best behavior. And in many ways, I feel like I was sort of destined to create and to host this kind of show, this sort of laboratory of human behavior, because of where I come from and where I was born. You see, a lot of people who just know me from television and see me up there on ABC with Barbara Walters and Robin Roberts and George Stephanopoulos and all the great people of ABC News, people who only know me from television have no idea the long, hard struggle that it took for John Quiñones to get to ABC News. We were born in poverty. I was born in the barrios of San Antonio, Texas. And you know how some people say we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. We knew we were poor, man. We had an old black and white television in the back of the house, and we saw how the other side lived. My dad was a janitor. My mom used to clean houses on the rich part of town. They didn't go to college. My father dropped out of the 3rd grade to pick cotton in South Texas, and my mother dropped out of the 4th grade to help support her family. And even though the family's been there 7 generations, the Quiñones family has been in Texas 7 generations, but we didn't speak English because you didn't have to. In our community, where 60% of the population of San Antonio is Hispanic, we didn't have to learn English because the church was in Spanish, and the corner store was in Spanish, and the radio station, the music that we listened to was all in Spanish. So I didn't learn English till I went to the 1st grade. So I love it today when people come up to me and say, "John Quiñones, you're Mexican-American. When did your family cross the border?" And it's like, we were always here for hundreds of years. Texas, before it was a state, was part of Mexico. Texas was part of Spain. And so was California, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, and parts of Wyoming. So I tell people I didn't cross the border crossed me. And suddenly, we're speaking English. And don't get me wrong, I'm very proud to be an American, first and foremost. I know that the opportunities that I was afforded to do what I do for a living, I could have never had that in Mexico. So I'm very, very proud to be an American, first and foremost. But I get a kick when people think, I just came over the border the other day. And when I went to the 1st grade, I didn't speak a word of English. So I'll never forget being in Mrs. Gregory's 1st grade class at Carvajal Elementary. I didn't speak a word of English, and the teacher didn't speak Spanish. This is before bilingual education, and we didn't go to preschool or kindergarten. My 2 sisters and I, we couldn't afford it. So we went straight to the 1st grade. And I remember I'm sitting there confused, twiddling my thumbs, little 6-year-old John Quiñones, at 10 in the morning, the school bell rings, right? So the kids, recess time, so the children all go out to the playground. Where does little Juanito Quiñones go? I walked home. I lived 1 block from the school. And I remember I got home, opened the gate, come in the door. My mother, Maria, God rest her soul, said, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What happened? I said, se acabó. It's over, Mom. I like school. 2 hours and you're done. This is going to work out very well. She grabbed me by the ear, literally, and dragged me back to Mrs. Gregory's first grade class because she knew the value of an education, having gone through what she and my father had been through. So she was the one who kept pushing and pushing. But I remember when I was 8 years old, to help the family, I shined shoes on Guadalupe Street in San Antonio. My cousin Joey and I, we would go to all the cantinas, the bars, because the drunk guys didn't realize how much they were tipping you. And we made a killing, man. But we would charge 10 cents a pair. To this day, I shine pretty good shoes. But I remember coming home one night, and a gang jumped us, because it was a tough neighborhood. There were drive-by shootings and gangs and drugs, and they took away all my earnings from that night and my shoe shine polish and the little box that I had made out of wood, and they stole it, they took it away from it, and that was the end of my shoe shining career. But when I was 13 years old, my father was laid off from his job. He was a janitor at the high school that I wound up going to, but for a while he was laid off. So I was 13, and we were forced to do what a lot of Latino families in South Texas had to do back then. We had no choice but to become migrant farm workers. So my 2 sisters, my mother and father and I, we jumped on the back of these trucks, 7 trucks with strangers in the back of the trucks, and we journeyed 1,700 miles from San Antonio, Texas, to Northport, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world, where we picked cherries for 75 cents a bucket. And I remember teetering on the top of these ladders, overlooking these orchards and orchards of cherry trees. And it would take me 2 hours to fill that darn bucket that was strapped around my neck. 2 hours for 75 cents. And then after picking cherries for 6 weeks, we did what all migrant farm workers do. We followed the crops. So we then got back in those trucks and we went all the way down to Ohio, just outside Toledo, Ohio, a town called Swanton, to pick tomatoes for 35 cents a bushel. And man, I was a champion tomato picker. I did very well at that. I would do 100 bushels a day. Well, back then, that's $35, just me alone. Then my father would pick 120 bushels, and my mother and my sisters would contribute to that. And we learned the value of the family, as many of you have here, the family coming together in times of difficulty and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. But I'll never forget being on my knees on the cold, hard ground at 6 in the morning with my father, Bruno. There I was, looking at a row of tomato plants that seemed to go on for miles and miles. That's what I had to look forward to that day. And my father, Bruno, looking down and saying, Juanito, do you want to do this kind of work for the rest of your life? Or do you want to get a college education? It was a no-brainer. I knew I didn't want to do that kind of work for the rest of my life, but no one believed in me. I was one of these kids who was not expected to become much because I was just another Mexican kid in San Antonio. So when I came back to school, I would ask my teachers, because I was determined not to have to pick tomatoes and cherries, right? I would ask my teachers in the 9th grade when I went back to San Antonio, I would say, how do I prepare for the SATs? How do I start preparing for the SATs, right? How do I take advanced placement classes in math, biology, and English so that someday I can go to school? Do you know what my own teachers would say to me? My own counselors at the school would say to me. They would say, John, it's wonderful. It's wonderful that you have this dream of someday being a television reporter. Because, man, I wanted to be a reporter since I was 12 years old. I used to watch Geraldo Rivera. Remember Geraldo on 2020? And I dreamed, he was the only Latino on television, national television. He had mustache and long hair and blue jeans, and he was really cool, and he was going to Turkey to do stories on heroin, and Colombia and South America. And I dreamed of someday living the adventures that Geraldo did. So people knew that. So I would tell my teachers that. And my teachers would say, that's great. That's great that you have this dream of someday being a television reporter, but we think you should try wood shop or metal shop or auto mechanics. Not that there's anything wrong with those trades. You know, we all know good people who make a good, hard living from that. But I wanted to go to college. And my own teachers, my own counselors in school would say, they did what people do on What Would You Do Every Friday Night. They judged me, again, by the color of my skin and the accent in my voice. But thank God for my mother. You know, we talk about how important you parents are. Thank God for my mother, Maria. She was the one who would say to me, son, mijo, she would say, it doesn't matter that you have to wear the same clothes to school every other day. At least we wash those clothes, right? They're clean. She would say, it doesn't matter that you have to take bean and tortilla tacos for lunch when all the other kids are taking their fancy bologna and white bread. Now we know beans and tortillas have more protein, right? So we got the last laugh on that one. She would say, it doesn't matter, son. Don't be so embarrassed. What matters is what's in here, in your corazón, in your heart, and what's in here. So she was the one that kept me pushing and pushing and pushing. And, you know, it was during the Civil Rights Movement. And I remember the words of Martin Luther King, who said, in times of adversity, you got to have faith. And faith is taking that first step. It doesn't matter if you can't see the entire staircase. Just take that first step. Because tomorrow, there'll be another step. And the next day, another baby step. So my first step was trying to get rid of my accent because I wanted to be like Geraldo Rivera and Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings. And I had a heavy Mexican accent because in Spanish there is no SH sound. So I would say, these are my chews, this is my shirt, and people would make fun of me. And I knew if I was going to be in television or radio, I would have to get rid of my accent. So I forced myself, and I was also painfully shy. And this isn't going to work, you know. You're going to be in front of people. You're shy. I was in my shell. So I forced myself to join the drama class in high school to get on a stage like this. And I tried out for the role of Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. Now, maybe it's because no one else tried out, but I wound up getting the role. I was Romeo for a citywide production in San Antonio of the Shakespeare's play. Now, the good news was that I got to kiss Juliet, Mary Lou Gomez. I'll never forget. We had to practice kissing behind the stage to get it right, you know. That was the good news. The bad news was that in this ridiculously macho, mainly Mexican-American school, I had to wear leotards. And man, I'm just glad there was no YouTube back then. But, you know, step by step, following the advice of Martin Luther King. You know, also, the great African-American poet Maya Angelou once wrote that we all marvel at the beauty of a butterfly, right? We all look at a butterfly and we marvel at how gorgeous the colors and the wingspan and all that. We all marvel at the beauty of the butterfly, but seldom do we consider all the changes that that butterfly has to go through to attain that beauty. I'm no butterfly, but man, I went through a lot of changes. And then along came my first hero in my life, besides my parents, and it was my English teacher. We all had that one teacher, right? Mrs. Gutierrez, who in the 10th grade taught me English. And she said, John, I love the way you write your stories. I love the way you write your essays. Have you thought about journalism? I said, of course. I've been watching Geraldo all these years. She said, no, I think you should talk to the man who runs the school newspaper, Mr. Harris, the Brackenridge Times in my high school. And I said, okay. So I went and talked to him, and I was hired as a reporter. So I've been doing this since I was 14 years old. And there I was writing stories. But then within a couple of months, they made me the chief of editorials for the Brackenridge Times. So there I was writing these big investigative stories, like why are the teachers parking in the students' parking spaces? You know? Tonight we go undercover and find out. And I loved it. I loved it. And then along came another hero in my life. And sometimes heroes don't have to be people. In my case, it was a government program called Upward Bound. And I don't even know if you know the program. It's part of the government's TRIO programs. It's still around. But basically, it was part of the Johnson and Kennedy administration's war on poverty. And the theory by these two presidents was that the only way out of poverty was through education. What a thought. And what they did is they knew that the schools were doing a pretty lousy job, especially in the inner city, the public schools where I went to school, of preparing us for college. So every Saturday, they would give us extra courses. If you were part of this program, they picked 10 students from every high school in the inner cities of America throughout the country, but especially in the poor neighborhoods of this country. And I was one of the lucky ones who was selected. I don't know why. My grades weren't that impressive, but they saw a spark. They saw something. And I was one of the 10 Upward Bound students from my high school. And I got to take extra courses on Saturdays in biology and math and English, and was better prepared. And thanks to Upward Bound, they also paid for your first semester in college. So man, I wouldn't be standing here today. That program today would be called welfare by some people in government. For me, it was a lifesaver. I wouldn't be here today. But I'll never forget, I know how hard it is for some of you parents here to see your kids, especially the freshmen, right, go away from your home for the first time. When I went to college because of Upward Bound, I came from a very Latino family where our parents, are very close to us, and I was the only boy. So I remember the first day I went away to college for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, that's all. I went to a college that was 45 minutes from my house. But I had to go live on a dorm, right? And I remember saying goodbye to my mother in the driveway. This place was less than an hour away, and she made it sound like I was going to Vietnam, She was crying, "Mijo, when am I going to see you again?" And like, "Mom, I'll be back Saturday with some dirty laundry, and I want some of those bean and tortilla tacos," right? So I know how hard it is, especially for Hispanic families and for all kinds of families. When we love our children so much that we hate to see them go away. But that was my first step into college, and thanks to them, then I got an internship, and that's my advice to you guys, the students here. Whatever you want to go into, make sure you get an internship to try out that work, whether it's law or medicine or engineering or whatever. In my case, it was journalism, and I got an internship at a radio station. I used to be while I was in college, I had 3 jobs. I worked in the school cafeteria, I worked in the geology department sorting rocks, and then at night, I got to be careful how I say this, because when I tell people I deliver drugs, they said, "Of course, you're Latino. You're a drug dealer, right?" No. I used to deliver medicine at a drugstore for little old ladies and older gentlemen who couldn't make it to the drugstore. So I delivered their prescription medicine. I would drive this beat-up Volkswagen, and I would go to their homes and bring their medicine. But I wanted so badly to go into broadcasting that I had an old beat-up little tape recorder. And between my deliveries at the drugstore at night, I would go into the men's room and I would read into the mic. I was trying to get rid of my accent. I would read whatever I could get my hands on and then play it back. Now, the owner of the drugstore heard me through the men's room door. And he said, when I came out, he goes, "John, you really are serious about wanting to get into broadcasting?" I said, "Yes, of course." He goes, "Well, I know the general manager of a radio station here in San Antonio, and they're looking for interns." I was 18 years old. I was a freshman, right? And I bugged him for weeks. "Please introduce me." And he finally did. And now, I was 18 years old. I liked R&B music. I loved rock music. This was a country music station. Not a big fan. Now I am. I like it now. But at 18, I wasn't. But it was called KKYX. The station was Kicks, like cowboy kicks. And they were looking for an intern. And I remember I went and they hired me as an intern for $2 an hour. You want to know what my job was at this radio station? The disc jockeys, you got to be from Texas to understand this, but the disc jockeys, the guys who play music on the radio, had horses in the back of the studios that they would use in public appearances like rodeos and parades. My first job in broadcasting for $2 an hour was to feed the horses and to clean up their mess in the back of the corral. But at night, here's the lesson in perseverance, right? Like the words of Martin Luther King, step by step. At night, I would go into the back of the studio, inside the studios, and I would record my voice in a great microphone and reel-to-reel recorders, and just practice my delivery. The only problem was at that hour of the night, it was midnight, there was no one there. The professionals, the disc jockeys, had gone home. So the only one there to criticize my work was the janitor, and his name was Pablo. And Pablo's English was worse than my father's, but I would drag him in the back of the studio and say, Pablo, listen to this. I would play it back. How does it sound? He would go, más o menos, more or less. It sounds pretty good. And then they let me do something on the air for the first time. They let me do something on the radio. There would be some new medicine out, and I got to tell you in the last 3 seconds where you could buy the medicine. Do you want to hear what the first words John Quiñones ever said on the radio? All right, okay. I got to say, all right, don't blink. I got to say, now available at Walgreens. And man, I was so proud of myself. I thought I had made it. And then they let me do the news, again, step by step. The news on Sunday nights, it was really Monday morning between 1 and 4 in the morning, 5 minutes of news on the hour. I think we had 4 listeners, my mother, my father, and my 2 sisters. But that's how you learn, right? And from there, I got a job at another radio station in Texas, and then I couldn't get hired in television in Texas. I wanted desperately to go into television, and no one would hire me because everyone had their one Hispanic reporter on the air, and it was almost like the quota had been met. We don't need another one, we got one. And I was depressed, and I was with a college degree, couldn't get a job in my dream vocation. So I was about ready to go to law school and, give up journalism altogether. But it's funny how life is. I met a woman who had gone to Columbia University, New York, the Graduate School of Journalism. And I told her my story, and she said, John, why are you going to go back to law school? If you're going to go back to school, why don't you go to Columbia, the Graduate School of Journalism? She said, I went there, and if you want to go, you're serious, I'll write a letter of recommendation for you. And she did. And I got accepted to Columbia. Not only that, I said, okay, now it's wonderful, but how am I going to pay for it? So like many of you guys, I took a cheap flight to New York, and I knocked on every single financial aid door at Columbia, telling them, look, guys, I'd love to come to school here. I've been accepted to your great school, but I can't afford it. So I'll work, I'll take a loan out in the grants, whatever. And luckily enough, I wound up getting a fellowship at Columbia to study there. And I was able then, like the Beverly Hillbillies, man, I packed up a U-Haul trailer and I moved to New York from Houston, Texas. And I loved it. And I was there for a year, and you got a master's. And right after that, I got a job in Chicago in television. And while I was there with WBBM in Chicago, I got at the CBS station. I did a story that I wanted to do for a long time about an issue that's still a hot-button issue today, immigration. Being Mexican-American and having family who cross that border, I wanted to get into what's the reason, what are the push factors that make someone leave their home in Mexico, their wives, their mothers, their girlfriends, their children, and risk their lives crossing the river or the desert in Arizona to come get a job here for $2 an hour as a dishwasher or a roofer or a construction guy. What are the push factors? So I convinced my news director in Chicago to let me go undercover and go to Mexico and pose as a Mexican trying to get into the U.S., speaking only Spanish, right? I wasn't dressed like this, obviously. And the news director said, John, if you're crazy enough to want to do this, go ahead. So me and a camera crew went to the border, and we went into Mexico, a town where half of the working age men had come to this country to work. And then I found a coyote, a smuggler, who for $300 sold me a fake birth certificate and a fake Social Security card, all captured on hidden camera. I hand over the cash, he gives me this identity, and he says to me, okay, tonight we'll cross the river here into the U.S. I'll put you on an inner tube. He thought I was just another immigrant trying to come into the U.S. So then I had to get in my car and go to the Texas side of the river. Back then, you could go back and forth pretty easily. And I got my camera crew to hide in the bushes on the Texas side of the Rio Grande. And I said, okay, tonight at 7 o'clock, I hope I'm going to be floating across the river. And I got back in my car. I went across the bridge into Mexico. I met up with a smuggler, the Coyote, who, thank God, was a decent guy. I mean, many of these guys will beat up the immigrant because they know they've been saving their whole lives for this crossing. They'll take their money and they'll maybe leave them for dead in the Rio Grande. Who's going to care, right? These people were breaking the law anyway, coming into this country illegally. So who would care? And today, bodies float on the Rio Grande from immigrants who don't make it. But thank God my Coyote was a decent guy. And I meet up with him on the banks of the Rio Grande, and he tells me to take my clothes off and put it in a plastic bag, because you don't want your clothes wet when you get to the other side. The Border Patrol will know you just swam across the river. So, and I was nervous because I was wearing a wireless mic like this under my shirt. So I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to bust me. So I convinced him to let me keep my T-shirt on. And sure enough, he puts me on an inner tube, and I floated across the Rio Grande to Texas, all captured by hidden camera. And I didn't stop there. From then, I got onto a bus, and I went back to Chicago, because remember, this was for a story in Chicago. And I got a job at a restaurant, at this Greek restaurant in Chicago, where we had heard that the owner of this restaurant had 7 Mexican workers, undocumented, right? Undocumented, working for him, and he had not paid them in 13 weeks. And every time they complained, he would tell the workers, hey guys, you get to sleep here in the basement. You get to eat all the food you want. You keep complaining, and I'll call immigration and have you deported. And by the way, that happens in this country today. So I went there, not dressed like this. I pretended I just arrived from Mexico, spoke only Spanish, met with the owner. He hired me. He hired me as a dishwasher. So by day, there I am washing dishes, with a hidden camera. And then at night, I went down into the basement with the other 7 Mexican workers. And I went to bed there next to the dishes and the cans of food and silverware. And I still wonder what those guys must have thought, because by day I'm washing dishes with them and bussing tables. And then at night, I pulled out a little camera and I started interviewing them in Spanish about their lives. And they told me how they were being held as virtual slaves in that restaurant. Hadn't gotten paid in 13 weeks. The next day, I came back to work, this time wearing a suit, speaking fluent English, with a camera crew behind me. And I remember we had to chase the owner of the restaurant through the parking lot because he didn't want to talk to me and about what he was doing to these men. But the next day after it aired on television, my story, the U.S. government moved in. They shut down the restaurant. They arrested the owner. And they got the Mexican workers the money they were owed in temporary visas to remain in this country while they worked on their residency. And I knew then, oh man. And I knew then that those were the kinds of stories that as a Hispanic reporter, I could tell better than anyone. I see journalism, imagine this room being pitch dark. I call journalism the candle in the darkness. Imagine we're locked in here, the electricity's gone out, right? We're stumbling around because there's not a single light. We can't even see our hands in front of our faces. Well, the journalist, he or she, is the person with the little candle or the little flashlight, and they can shine it on the darkest corners of the room to illuminate injustice, to illuminate corruption and civil rights violations and human rights violations. I think when journalism is done right, and we're not doing it right all the time these days, but when it's done right, those are the kinds of stories that we should be telling. My story about crossing the Rio Grande and working at that restaurant won my first Emmy Award. I was 26 years old, and ABC News in New York was watching. Peter Jennings was watching. My dream was about to come true. They hired me to go cover Central America because Peter Jennings and ABC News had a reporter named Bill Stewart. And if you Google Bill Stewart, 1980, Central America, you'll see what happened to him. He was an ABC correspondent who went to cover Central America. They sent him down there. He didn't speak a word of Spanish. And he winds up getting caught up at a military checkpoint, and the soldiers are questioning him, and they think he's a communist. And the camera crew is rolling, and they put a gun, these soldiers put a gun to the head of our correspondent, Bill Stewart, and they shoot and kill him, accusing him of being a communist. The networks then, in all their wisdom, said, we should hire people who speak Spanish to go to Central America. And there I was in Chicago with my little Emmy Award, and they hired me. And the irony didn't escape me. When I was a kid in school, our coaches used to hit us with a paddle if they caught us speaking Spanish. The coach had a big old wooden paddle, and they drilled holes in it for extra speed and power. And they would give us 3 spankings if they caught me speaking Spanish in school in San Antonio. So the irony didn't escape me when I became a network correspondent. Here was a kid who used to get punished for speaking Spanish, and I wind up getting my dream network job like Geraldo at ABC precisely because I spoke Spanish to cover Central America. And I loved it. I mean, I spent 15 years running around Nicaragua. Some of you guys are too young to remember. But back in the 80s, there were all these wars going on in Nicaragua and El Salvador and Panama. And that was my world. I lived down there, and I worked for this great anchorman, Peter Jennings. He's been gone for 10 years. He passed away, but we still miss him at ABC. The guy was amazing. He was really good, but he was also he had this fancy Canadian accent, right? And he was intimidating. For a young reporter like me, he scared the heck out of us. And I remember being in Nicaragua, and I got this big exclusive interview with the president of Nicaragua, a guy named Daniel Ortega. And I called New York, and I was a brand new reporter at ABC, right? So I wanted to impress Peter Jennings. So I called him and said, Peter, I have this exclusive interview with Daniel Ortega. It was a big deal back then. So he got on the phone, he goes, fine, young man. I don't think he knew my name. He said, fine, young man, I look forward to having you on World News tonight at 6:30. Well, when I hang up with Peter, I get a call from the president's office in Nicaragua canceling my interview. So now I have to call James Bond in New York and give him the bad news. And as a rookie reporter, I thought I was going to get yelled at, or worse, that I might get fired because I wasn't able to deliver what they had prepared the show for. And instead, Peter Jennings gave me some words of wisdom that I'll never forget. He said, John, this is going to happen again in your career where someone promises you something, but they can't deliver. They won't deliver it. He said, don't worry so much about talking to the movers and the shakers of the world, you know, like presidents of companies, corporations and countries and politicians. Don't worry so much, he said, about talking to the movers and the shakers of the world. Talk to the moved and the shaken. In other words, talk to the real people in those countries. You, as a Hispanic reporter, can go into the countryside in Nicaragua and Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador and bring back stories because you understand the culture and you speak the language and you look the way you do. You can go get into those places and get people to open up to you and get stories that even I, he said, even I, Peter Jennings, can't get. And man, that's all I did. For the rest of the next 15 years, I traipsed around Latin America and I interviewed everyone from Fidel Castro and Cuba, and then I wound up working for 2020, my dream job, like Geraldo. So the dream came true. And I went to Africa. I interviewed Jane Goodall, the woman who spent 30 years studying chimpanzees in Tanzania. And I loved it. And I loved it. And I did stories, all kinds of human interest stories. But it's funny. Today, the one show, despite the 7 Emmy Awards, the one show that people recognize me for more than anything is What Would You Do? And I am very proud of it. And I brought along one of my favorite scenarios. You want to see one? Okay, this one, it's a video, great. It has to do with what do you do if someone brings a homeless person into a restaurant to feed them because the person is hungry, and then the bartender of that restaurant kicks the homeless person out. So check it out, and we'll talk about it afterward. They are those among us with the least. Almost 500,000 people who call the streets home. Their meals, whatever they can find, whatever they are given.
Help me out, get something to eat.
What would you do if you saw a good Samaritan give a homeless man $20 for a bite to eat,
So get whatever you want, okay?
only to see him tossed back to the curb the second she leaves?
It's bad for business. I can't let you sit in here.
A man denied service simply because he's homeless. Today, we brought our hidden cameras to the streets of Lynbrook, New York, and McQuaid's restaurant. Of course, both Tracy and Kevin are actors, and the bartender, Jeremy,
It's not your money. Get out of here.
he's definitely an actor. Everyone at this bar knows it, except this man, and our hidden cameras are rolling.
Oh, wow, it's nice in here.
Hi, this is a friend of mine. Do you have a menu or something he can look at? Just get it whatever you want, okay? Here's $20.
It's really, really nice.
Right away, he takes notice.
Take care, okay?
Thank you so
I have to
much.
get back to work.
But as soon as Tracy leaves, Jeremy has a change of heart.
Listen, man, they have places that you can go and you can get it like a soup kitchen or something.
I'm a paying customer. Look, I mean, I got $20.
That's not your money. I don't want you to bother these paying customers.
I'm not bothering anybody.
Okay?
Am I bothering you?
Why don't you leave? He's being polite.
Perhaps, but for Oleg Babsky, this is about more than manners.
Yeah, but you took his $20.
Not his $20.
His $20, you gave it to him for him to eat. I heard it.
Okay, but if I give this 20 back to him, what's he gonna do?
Whatever he wants to do, it's his money.
He's gonna go buy liquor.
He wanted to eat. That's what he's looking for.
We've barely begun here, but already a bold move.
Who are you calling?
Please.
You're calling the police on me?
Yeah.
He makes it clear to Jeremy it's meal or no deal.
Give him back the 20.
Thank you.
Not everyone is quite so welcoming.
Uh-oh. We got a homeless guy outside.
But now the homeless guy is inside.
Do you have a menu that I can look at?
These two women don't want a homeless man seated anywhere near them.
These ladies, and I can smell you too, you smell.
And when Jeremy intervenes, they offer an alternative.
He's bothering you, right?
But let him take something to go to eat.
But he shouldn't sit here, right?
No.
I'll be outside, okay, sir?
Sorry about that, lady.
No, it's fine. I wouldn't care if he smelled.
Hope that didn't ruin your appetite.
No.
Tough day for Kevin. These next two men also give him the cold shoulder.
Am I bothering you guys? I'm just trying to get something to eat.
These guys work, right? They work all their lives, they pay for their food.
They won't even look our homeless man in the face.
Excuse me.
Please don't get involved here.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't own the place.
Imagine you're down on your luck.
Sir,
Help a guy out.
Sir, mind your own business.
Thank you, guys.
With his pleas falling on deaf ears, we tell Kevin to leave.
Sorry, guys. You feed him once, you feed him twice, then there's 20 guys sitting here.
Absolutely.
They agree with Jeremy. Why?
I think it was wrong for a lady to walk in here, bring a homeless guy in here. If that's her friend, take the money and buy a sandwich somewhere.
But not here.
Wrong place.
Wrong place. And as this next man walks in, things only get worse.
Run him through the dishwasher in the back. Just want to get a little bit of food.
Don't cough on everything.
Sorry.
Along with Jeremy, he literally laughs at Kevin's misfortune.
Can I please get a sandwich?
No.
Oh my God. Give the guy a couple of croutons that are on the floor in the kitchen or something. I'm a paying customer, man.
Here's the thing. I don't work in a soup kitchen. I work in a bar, okay? When you go...
It seems like he couldn't care less about our homeless man. But then he realizes there's more at stake here.
Can you give me my money back then, please?
I'm not going to give you the money back.
Give the guy his money. You got to give him his money back at least. If he gets caught somewhere else, whatever.
You going to buy booze with this?
No.
Now watch what happens when Kevin leaves the restaurant.
I just don't think homeless people should be allowed in bars, you know? How did he end up here? He wasted his money.
Well, I mean, we don't know that. We don't know that.
That's true.
I mean, he looks like a decent guy.
a decent guy. And as it turns out, so is Anthony Gambino.
Do me a favor, make the guy a sandwich and put it on my bill, right?
Make him a sandwich and put it on? Okay.
Kevin, you're still standing by out there, right?
Yeah.
This guy said he just wants to buy you a sandwich.
You're kidding me, that guy?
What kind of sandwich should I get him? Turkey burger?
Turkey burger. Nah, he needs a little something more than that.
More than that?
Yeah, that's for Weight Watchers. Get him the short skirt steak tacos.
A lot of protein in that?
100%.
And now Anthony, a man who seconds ago was insulting Kevin, hand delivers his meal.
Hungry? Here you go, pal.
Serious?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, enjoy.
Before he buys him a round of drinks, time to introduce ourselves. Started off joking with the guy.
Yeah, I was messing around with him. Just trying to rile him up a little bit on his first day.
And then you wind up doing something that totally surprised us.
You know, I've had some hard times in my life, and, you know, other people were there for me, you know, so I try and do the same thing.
Paying it forward. This next man understands that concept all too well as soon as he sees Kevin on the street.
Thanks, bud.
Look, you can just sit right here.
Seconds later, Kevin is seated right next to him.
I want you to bother anybody. I don't want you to bother this nice
He didn't bother me.
Thank you.
Why don't you have some soup? If you've never been there, you don't know what it's like.
No, I work, you know.
Yeah, we all work. All of us have had their times.
Can I get like a glass of water? Just water?
You want the free thing on the menu?
A small request that leads to a touching moment.
Thank you.
Now you're making him give you his drink.
No, don't worry about it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To your health.
To yours too.
Thanks.
Better times.
But from Jeremy, the insults just keep getting worse.
Sure, there's a hose out there somewhere.
You don't have to be cruel, man.
Want me to be cruel? Get out of here. Hope you enjoyed your water.
Why'd you take the money, buddy?
And you know what he's going to do? He's going to buy drugs and alcohol with you.
He may, but you can't take that money from him. You take that money from him and you'll steal it, and I will make sure that you get arrested for it.
Why are you defending a homeless guy?
Because you're a prick.
Kevin leaves.
Sorry if it upset you. I hope I did the right thing.
No, you didn't.
And Arnie Gerber is full of emotion.
Think I was wrong?
Absolutely. Completely wrong.
Really?
You never had been in bad shape. You never had you needed help. You never had anything happen to you that you wish you did or you wish you could get out. Well, we don't know what the hell happened to this guy.
It's a message that's very personal to Arnie. And you said to him, haven't you ever been through hard times?
Haven't we all? Well, everybody's been through hard times. And we survive them in some way. And if somebody helps you and gives you a push-up, fine.
Almost half of the people we met this day did just that. They spoke up for a hungry stranger down on his luck. Heroes? They don't think so.
Heroic is the guy that landed the plane in the Hudson River. That's heroic. And wouldn't anybody else do the same thing?
Oh, yes. You know, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, he's really good. Love this guy. You know, Martin Luther King said that our lives begin to end the moment we stay silent about things that matter. And that's what the show is all about, you know. Speaking up, sounding the alarm, helping out a stranger, those little tiny acts of kindness. Some of the stories we do are serious, but some are fun. I don't know if you saw the one we did on a stolen bicycle. We chained a brand new bike at a park to a pole right along a jogging path where people are, you know, running and walking their dogs and pushing their baby strollers. And we had an actor pretend he was stealing that brand new bike. And we told the actors, if people ask you if you're stealing the bike, admit it, say yes. Because we didn't want people to think they'd lost their key. So first we did it with a white young man, about 26 years old, polo shirt, hacksaw, and wire cutters. And when he was cutting the chain on the bike, and people asked him, "Are you stealing the bike?" He goes, "Yeah, I need a bike. This one has been here a while. I'm going to take this bike." When it was a white actor, people muttered something under their breaths, they shook their heads, but no one called 911. And then we switched things up as we do on the show, and we had now an African-American actor play the part of the thief. Same clothes, same age, same outfit, with the hacksaw and the wire cutters. Within 4 seconds after he started cutting the chain, people surrounded him like a posse and not only called 911, which they should have done with the white guy, but they're taking his picture and video with their cell phone saying, "We got you now, man." Even the black actor was like, "John, this is ridiculous. The white guy got away with it." And then, as a final twist, we had another actor, this time a very attractive young woman. Beautiful hair blowing in the wind, short shorts, tight t-shirt like a supermodel with a hacksaw and the wire cutters. Men helped her steal the bike. Time and again, over and over, guys were falling over each other trying to help her. There was this middle-aged couple on their bicycles, and the wife told her husband, "Honey, she's stealing that bike." He said, "Yes, but she's a damsel in distress. She needs help." So he's pulling the bike out of the pole, and of course the actress is going along with it. She's, "Oh, you're so strong." "Thank you, thank you." And then she asked him, "Do you see any cops around?" So now he's looking for the police. He's an accomplice. I still wonder what the ride home with his wife must have been like after we told him it was "What would you do?" But my favorite ones are the more serious ones, the ones that deal with homelessness and racism. We did one where we asked the question, what would you do if you're walking down the sidewalk and the person in front of you collapses? It could be a heart attack, she could have fainted, you don't know. And first we did it with a well-dressed businesswoman, right, in her 40s. She's a stunt artist who falls very convincingly, an actress. So she's walking a line, and we did it right by the Newark train station in New Jersey at 8 in the morning. Now you have to decide, not only are you going to help a stranger who's down, but it's 8 in the morning when you're going to work or you're going to school, right? You don't have time. You have that added element to think about. So we did it with a well-dressed businesswoman, and when she's walking along, she collapses very convincingly. Every time, within seconds, people stopped and helped her and put a coat over her and went, "Wow, who would have thought? Newark, New Jersey, huh?" And then we said, but what if we switch things up? Because we always do this. What if we switch things up? And instead of a well-dressed businesswoman, we're going to have a homeless man like this guy, but older, an old man who's dirty, filthy, smelly, and he's holding a beer can in his hand. So we found an actor to play that role, another stunt artist. So he's walking along, he collapses, 88 people go by, and no one is stopping to help. People are stepping over him. One lady made the sign of the cross and kept going. And we said, wow, I guess if you're homeless, very few people are going to help, especially if you're holding a beer can, right? So I'm about ready to come out, the way I always come out with the cameras in the open and tell people it's part of the show, when suddenly we heard the tapping of a walking cane on the sidewalk. We didn't see anything, but we heard somebody walking along with a walking cane hitting the pavement. And into the frame of the hidden camera comes this beautiful African-American woman who is stumbling along because she has suffered a stroke. And guess what? She's homeless herself. And guess what? She stops. And she starts asking people going by, "Excuse me, do you have a cell phone to call for an ambulance for this man? Can someone call for help?" Because she doesn't have a cell phone. She's homeless. 37 more people go by, and no one is stopping. She then stumbles over, and she did something we didn't expect. She takes the beer can out of the homeless man's hands and puts it in the trash can, as if she was trying to give him a little bit of dignity, thinking, maybe then Maybe then people will stop and help if they don't think he's some sort of wino, right? 42 more people go by, and no one is stopping. She then looks up to the heavens, and I'll never forget this because the camera was right on her face, and she made a fist at almost God himself, as if she was saying, God, how can you allow this to happen? She was cursing God himself. She was angry. And then she stumbled down again to the man on the ground, and we could hear this because the guy was wearing a wireless microphone, the actor. And she leaned over and she said, Sir, I don't know your name, but I'm going to call you Billy. And Billy, my name is Linda Hamilton. And don't you worry, my man, I want to stay here. I'm homeless too. So I know what it's like. I'm going to stay here until help arrives. And then finally a woman stopped and called 911. And I came out with the cameras. And of course, when I asked her why she stopped, she said, because I watch your show. And I promised my children that if I ever saw anything, I would do something. But when I come out, there's a lot of excitement. People are, yes, it's the show and all that. And we're getting people to sign releases to be on the show. And in all that chaos, we lost our hero. The homeless woman who stopped to help, Linda Hamilton, she walked away. But we knew her name. So a few weeks later, we put the piece on, What Would You Do on a Friday Night? And the day after it aired, people like yourselves, our viewers, called hundreds of times to my phone at ABC, on Twitter, and on emails saying, who was that woman? We want to help her. Viewers like yourselves. And they started collecting money. And they created a Facebook page for her called Touched by an Angel, Touched by Linda Hamilton. So now we got to go find her to give her the money that people have collected. So we sent our staff out to Newark, New Jersey again, and they spent 2 weeks with her picture from the TV screen saying, have you seen this woman? And they went to every train station and every liquor store and every homeless shelter. And guess what? We found her. A week later, we found her. And then my producer said, John, you got to come out and bring your laptop so you can show her the piece. Because she obviously is homeless. She hasn't seen it on television. So I sat with Linda Hamilton on some church steps in Newark, New Jersey. And I showed her the piece. And she goes, that's me. I said, yes. Don't you remember we were over there? She said, yeah, I remember now. And so we got her the $8,000. We opened a bank account in her name. We got her a place to live. We got her medicine that she was supposed to be taking for her heart that she wasn't taking. And the thing that made her most excited of all, we got her own cell phone. So like a 12-year-old girl with her first phone, she was jumping up and down with joy. And I told her, next time you see something now, Linda, you can call 911. But at the end, I said, you know what, Linda? People are calling you a hero. They're calling you an angel because of what you did. They created a Facebook page on Facebook called Touched by an Angel. Do you consider yourself a hero? And she looked at me and she goes, no way, John Quiñones, no way. She said, let me tell you what happened that day. She said, I think God put me on that corner, on that street, on that day, because he knew you were there with your What Would You Do cameras. And he wanted to teach people a lesson. And who better to teach that lesson than someone who's walked in the shoes of the homeless? So today, I leave you with that message. The next time you see something disturbing, you witness an injustice, bullying, racism, and the little voice in the back of your head says, do something, remember the words and the actions of this woman, Linda Hamilton, a woman who was homeless, who had suffered a stroke, and yet she stopped to help a stranger, not because she was going to be on national television. She didn't know that. Not because she was going to get $8,000 and a place to live and medicine for her heart and her own cell phone. She did not know that. She did it because, as my dear Mother Maria would say, her corazón, her heart, told her it was the right thing to do. Thank you for having me here today. It's been a real pleasure talking to all of you. Really, thank you. Thank you so much. You're too kind. Really, thank you. Thank you. It's been a joy. It's great. Thank you. You want to do some Q&A? Thank you, guys. You're too kind.
John has graciously agreed to do some questions, Q&A, for just a short amount of time. So we have a couple students in the audience.
Yeah, any
Garrett
questions
and
at all
Jared.
about the show or journalism or what I do or where I'm from? Who's got a question? Don't be shy. Anybody? The show will be back in June. We're filming new ones right now. Not right now, but in New York. And we're going to be traveling with the show again. It's fun doing it. And it's funny how many people sign the releases even though they do the most god-awful things. It's like, when am I going to be on television? Sir, you came across as the racist. That's okay, it's okay. I want my family to see this. The other day, we were filming at a bar, and there was a couple at the bar who stopped the drunk guy. He was an actor, but he was pretending to be drunk, and they took the keys away, and they kept him from getting in his car with his little boy. It was very impressive. So I came out, and I told the couple at the bar, I said, wonderful, you guys are the real heroes. Sign a release so we can put you on TV. And they said, no, you can't put us on TV. I said, wait a minute, you're the heroes. You didn't do something embarrassing. You did the right thing. And they looked at me and they said, yes, at this bar, yes, but I'm not married to her and she's not married to me. So they did the right thing about one thing, but not the other. I think we have a question. Yes.
What was the scariest situation that you were ever put in during your career?
The scariest was Central America when I was covering the wars. You know, of course, when you're 27 years old, you think you're invincible, right? But no, there were moments where I was in Panama. The U.S. invaded Panama in 1989, and I was there with my producer. And the soldiers for General Noriega, the dictator in Panama, they attacked the Marriott Hotel where 100 journalists were staying. They knew that we were all staying there. And they took 40 hostages, including my producer. We were hiding under our bed most of the night, and then in the daytime, he went out, and they caught him when he was in the lobby. The soldiers caught him in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel. His wife was pregnant in Miami. I had to call her, and she was calling me crying, saying, you're going to get him out. Fortunately, he escaped. He was able to get out within 24 hours. But that was the scariest moment of my career. Just that in Central and Nicaragua. We were caught under gunfire sometimes. But, you know, you're determined to get the story. The good news is that I was never by myself. It was always with a cameraman and a sound man and a producer. So there was 4 of us. And whenever we would go into something that might be dangerous, we would take a vote, and I didn't want to put their lives in jeopardy if they didn't want to do it. So only if we all wanted to go into something, we would do it. But you're driven by this desire to tell the truth and to expose what was going on there. It's like having a front row seat to world events. And I love doing those stories. I don't know that I would go back again now. I did all that. You feel like your luck may run out. But my mother, who was very Catholic, I wouldn't tell her where I was going to be in these danger zones in Central America. But she would see me on television, of course, so I couldn't lie to her. And my sisters tell me that when I would appear on TV with Peter Jennings from Nicaragua, John Quiñones, she would go up to the screen and bless the screen to keep me safe. And it worked. I'm still here. Someone else? Any other questions? Yes, I think it's a young... Oh, okay. Then you.
What was the hardest episode to film in terms of like the lack of positive responses you got from like bystanders?
Well, at the beginning, when no one knew the show, it was harder to get, people to sign because they didn't know the show was on much of a success. So one of the very first ones we did was about what would you do if you were at a soccer game for children, and there's the ultimate soccer dad in the stands screaming and yelling at everyone and making a fool of himself, but the father of one of the girls, right? So we picked this little scrimmage game for 8-year-old soccer players, all girls, in Montclair, New Jersey. So we went to this game. The show was brand new. We hadn't done too many of them. And we had this actor in the audience making a fool of himself, yelling at the refs, yelling at the coach, but we told him not to yell at the girls, right? And not to curse. So he didn't, but he made a fool of himself for a whole hour, and I'm hiding in a van, watching it all on monitors. Nothing happened. No one confronted this guy. So then I came out of my van, crossed the soccer field, and with the cameras out in the open, and I went up to the fathers, and I said, guys, hi, I'm John Quiñones. That's always the scariest part. People are angry or crying, and I have to tell them it's just a show. And in this case, no one had even heard of the show. It was one of the first ones. So I went up to these fathers, and I said, sir, this is part of a show. The guy in the audience, he was an actor. We wanted to see if anyone would say anything. And he goes, what? I said, it's a TV show called What Would You Do? And we wanted to see what would happen. And he goes, this is a TV show? You ruined my daughter's game for your stupid show? And I kind of understood a little bit. I said, well, I wouldn't put it that way. The greater good, he goes, you ruined my daughter's... I'm a lawyer. I have 1 hour with her Saturday mornings to come play with, and you did this to me. And he points to my face on camera, and he goes, you are an asshole. And I turned around, and one of the other fathers has attacked our cameraman. I swear to God. And they're fighting in the mud. They're wrestling in the mud. The $50,000 camera is shattered. The little girls are running around screaming, crying. The fathers are cursing. Even we told the actor not to curse. The fathers are cursing like sailors. They called the cops on us. That never got on What Would You Do? And never will, I don't think. So that was the worst one, I think. But to prevent that, we have a security guy now in the audience, just in case things get crazy. And if I can't get out there fast enough, then he tells them it's a show. But it's always awkward, because I always want to push it as far as I can, right, to get the best reactions. And my producers are like sweating bullets, saying, John, we got to go now. Stop it now. And just a little bit more, It's fun. It's always interesting. And it's fun to see who steps in. It's usually the person you would least expect. We'll be doing a thing on race, and we're watching it, and suddenly in walks this big dude with a shaved head, tattoos, on a motorcycle. And I'll tell my people, we got to watch this guy. He's going to be the racist, right? He's a biker, like white supremacist dude. He turns out to be a teddy bear, okay, who embraces the victim and yells at the racist. You just never know. Then along comes this little old lady, sweet woman with a pink dress and the flower in her hair. And she turns out to be the meanest witch. You just never know. You never know. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah, that's my son. My son produced that piece that you just saw. He's great. I love him. Thanks. About issues like race? Yeah, I think we're not biased. I just bring a different perspective because of where I come from. So, for example, if we do a story on the border, I will not only just interview the Border Patrol, but I want to interview the people who are crossing also. And because I can speak Spanish, I can do that. And I think it's a better, well-rounded story than if you just got the official word from the White House or from the Border Patrol, right? So I think as a reporter, I can bring things to my stories that perhaps someone else might not be able to. And I can get people to open up to me. So I don't think it's biased at all. I hate this term fake news that, that's so often thrown around these days in describing what we do. I think certain people just want to hear their point of view. And if they're not hearing their point of view, they accuse us of making it up. I can swear to you that every script that I write, even on What Would You Do, every story that I write, every script that I write for these stories, We have lawyers looking over them to make sure we're not maligning or we're not making up stuff. We have 2 sources who have to confirm that what we're reporting is true. We don't take what we do lightly. And it's an insult to a person who spent his life covering journalism to be accused of making stuff up. No, we don't. We just want to shine a light on these issues and bring it out of the darkness. It's just that sometimes people don't want you to. And that's when they complain. Yeah. Really. Thank you. Okay. Well, it turns out my Hispanic hero, Geraldo Rivera, he's only half Hispanic. No, Puerto Rican and Jewish, it turns out. No, I've met him. Of course I did, and I still think, he's an amazing guy. He's a lawyer. He's been around. He's now on Fox Business Channel. He's got a talk show Friday nights and Saturday nights. He's amazing. I got to meet him, and I thanked him for being a role model for me. A lot of people don't like what he does because he's pretty brash. He becomes a part of the story often, and it's not just the story. It's Geraldo in the story, and I think other journalists might disagree with that approach. But I did get to meet him, and he was wonderful in welcoming me to 2020. When he left, I came to 2020, which is really ironic that I got to meet my hero. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes. We have to ask have we ever had a restaurant, he says, who told us we can't be there? We got to ask them before, because we spent the night putting hidden cameras inside the building, right? Inside the restaurant. So we got to be able to get their permission first. So often they want to be on television because we give them national publicity. And sometimes they believe so strongly in the show. And that's a good thing now, that we've made a reputation for exposing a lot of true feelings of people, that there are restaurant owners who want us they want to be a part of it. It went wrong one time when we were doing a story about a missing girl, and there was a poster of this child that was missing at the cash register at a restaurant. And then we had an actor bringing that child, a really seedy, scary-looking guy, come in with her. The question was, will people call the cops? Will they recognize the little girl from the picture? And the owner of the restaurant, people were so upset that we were doing this way, and they were so shaken by it all that they started threatening him that they would never come back to the restaurant. And he told us to stop, and we didn't do that one anymore. So only very seldom does that happen. Most of the time, people are very happy to have us, and it works well. Someone else?
Señor Quiñones.
Where are you? Okay.
Aquí.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for representing the Hispanic culture the way you do. Thank you for your speech today.
Oh, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my sister, Rosemary. No.
¿Me podría dar su autógrafo?
Thank you. Of course. Yes.
Gracias. Thank you.
All right. She just wants an autograph. That's not bad, right? Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Congratulations to all of you students. Have a wonderful stay here. I think it's going to be a wonderful 4 years for you. And parents, support them as much as you can. All right? It's been great being with all of you. Really, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Was it okay?